Hey, welcome back everybody to part 3. So we are going to pick up where we left off the last time with our OSR review of Journey to the Overland. And so when we finished last time, we were just getting to the part with NPC characters. But I did want to go back for 1 second and talk about one more thing regarding the experience points. Now, the last time we were here, I told you get your experience points and then you get XPs to spend. The way the game is now, the only thing you can really spend experience points on are skills. So you would use these to buy regular skills or advanced skills. One of the things I'm going to be doing, or I've already done, for the revised and expanded edition that the Kickstarter is running for, is you are now going to also be able to use your XPs to spend to buy traits for your character. So that is kind of a new, it is going to be a new, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I guess it's just going to be a new aspect, a new characteristic that your character will be able to have. And basically the traits are going to be like mini skills. So they won't be as comprehensive as a full skill. So say, for example, if you have ranger skill, rangers help with getting lost. They help you when it comes to firing missile weapons. They have certain talents with animals. Well, a trait, for example, may simply help you with getting lost. So like for 5,000 XP, you may be able to buy a trait called sense of direction, right? And if you buy sense of direction, it will decrease your chance of getting lost by 20%, or you can re-roll if you get lost. So that's one of the things that I'm looking, well, actually I've already written into the new rules, and I just wanted to kind of point that out. Now, getting back to where we left off, we were going to look at NPC characters. Now, anybody that knows what a role-playing game is knows what NPC characters are. And in Journey to the Overland, that's pretty much no different. I mean, they serve the same purpose. They usually are, you know, they're run just like normal NPC characters. I think the only thing distinctive about Journey to the Overland when we talk about NPC characters is almost all of your NPC characters, 90% of them you encounter will be through the game cards. And probably in the last one of these I will show you guys the cards and the map just to kind of show you what comes with it. I mean, this is actually a review of the rules. But there are also certain NPCs that are germane to the game itself, and those actually are in the book. So the book does not have a listing for every NPC you will encounter. There are a lot of NPCs that are on game cards that aren't in the book. But what the book lists are those NPCs that you will deal with very frequently. And so those NPCs, all of their statistics and how you play them in the game are included in the book. And that's what we're going to look at here. So in this section, the first thing we see are the Bane Knights. Now, the Bane Knights are called that because they occupy these fortresses called the Bane Forts that surround the Overland. So you have like Pirates Bane, Warriors Bane, Rebels Bane, and Demons Bane. And basically the forts form a circumference around the coastline, so that every coastline, north, south, east, west, there is a fort manned by a knight, right? And that is, these knights all serve the king. And at various times in the game, if something happens, you may get an event that says the first knight will leave from Warrior's Bane, right? And if you see that, you would come to this section here, and you see the first knight is Bone Lord. Those are his statistics, and it says he approaches from Pirate's Bane. And so you locate that on the map, and he would basically have troops and a squire that leave with him, and those are right here. It tells you that each knight has a squire and it tells you, you know, how many troops that accompany them during the game. So obviously, if you were, for example, to march on King's Castle in that objective, all of these Bay Knights would start heading to King's Castle from their forts. Now, there's like 2 forts that currently do not have Bay Knights assigned to them, because you see there's only 3 listed. I have not decided in the rule book if I'm going to occupy the other forts, because technically they're supposed to be available to player characters who become knights. As part of becoming a knight, you could get assigned a Bane fort. The next germane NPCs in the game are listed here. So the first one are rioters, which I encountered those in one of my recent playthroughs, and they are very, very treacherous. You do not want to deal with a bunch of rioters, right? And that's anybody that's ever heard of a riot or seen a riot knows why. You just don't want to deal with them. This is the great Elf Vinetech, who you would have to deal with. I believe he is the one that has the Bow of Light. The Fire Elemental is the one, I believe, he guards the Peaceful Palms. And then the Great Wizard Vandro is the one who has the Resurrection Ring. And I don't know, I may swap these around when I redo the 2nd edition. And maybe I'm thinking of putting the Fire Elemental either on the Bow of Light or the Bloodblade. I don't remember which one of these actually guards the Bloodblade. I think that one is the Unknown Knight. I don't think he's in here. Oh, well, yeah, he's in there. I just don't have the art. You have the Hunters, and then you have Constables, which Constables play a huge role in this game. I mean, you will almost always run into Constables depending on what you are doing, which is kind of very D&D. I mean, just about every D&D encounter, there's some run-in with the Constables or the law or whatever. And then the book kind of gives you a blurb on chance cards, on encounter cards. Chance cards is basically referring to the encounter cards. The encounter cards, basically, it tells you that every card will tell you how far away the character is you're encountering, how much gold they have on them, how many are present, and the possessions they have. And this explains that, so I'm not going to really get into that specifically. This is the NPC Reaction Table, right? And this is what I was saying is kind of, you will find this in a lot of old school role-playing games where you encounter an NPC. And really the basic mechanic of the game is, as you have an encounter, unless the card has something specific on it as saying this person attacks or this person does that, then you will always roll on the NPC Reaction Table. So you will pull a card, you roll on the NPC Reaction Table, and then you will see what's going to happen. This is also how you would determine if an NPC becomes a comrade, which you can see right down there, NPC comrade on 96 and up. This is your % encounter table. So as you enter terrain or you travel through terrain and you go by the next hex you're heading to, this tells you what your % of an encounter. And if you pass this %, then that means you have to pull an encounter card. And so that's pretty simple. This is the table that talks about getting lost. This may get revised as well in the upcoming game. I mean, right now you can really get lost. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. This talks about hunting. So again, this is kind of the general gameplay section that I indicated. A lot of this would be getting moved closer to the front. So obviously, if you run out of food, you can hunt depending, on what type of terrain you're in. There is some terrain like deserts where you can't hunt. This talks about wounds, how your wounds get healed. This is the ocean section. So we saw the skill for becoming an admiral. So this section deals with all the different things you can do in the ocean. And a lot of the map is actually made up of water or water hexes. I mean, I probably could have got more territory in if I didn't have as much water on the map. But if you get into this section, you can really take advantage of that, especially for your character. You know, being on the ship, there's a separate encounter table when you're on the ocean. You don't pull encounter cards, right? When you're traveling by ship, you don't pull encounter cards. So this is the ships you can buy, their cost, and this is kind of a very streamlined system. So there's their ocean adventures that you would roll if you have an encounter while you're on the ocean. But what I was saying was this is a very streamlined system with ships and ocean encounters. I didn't want to complicate it too much, so building a ship is pretty easy. Their stats are pretty basic, but it's actually, you know, there's actually some fun things you can do. And this table here right now, I think it has about, I want to say there's maybe 20 encounters here. That is actually going to get doubled in the next edition. I've added a lot more ocean encounters. So I really want to encourage people to try those rules out. This is the town and castle activity section, which is one of my favorite sections. So this section of the rules kind of tells you everything you can do in a town or castle. And really that's kind of the heart of the game. The majority of the game you will spend moving from one town to another town to another town to a castle. And this is all the things you can only do inside a town or castle. So the first thing is you can rent a home, which is not exactly cheap, but it could actually pay off for you in the long road, especially if you start having items that you don't want to drag around with you. You would rent a home and leave them there. And you can rent a home in more than one town. Lodging, you have to buy lodging if you're in a town, or else you risk getting robbed. If you sleep on the street, somebody's going to rob you. So I almost will never stay in a town unless I have money for lodging, because things are very expensive in this game and you don't want to just be getting robbed every time you're in a town. You can seek to hire help. And this is one of the things that I think every beginning player ignores. Right, and I often get emails or messages. My guy died on the first encounter. You know, I encountered 3 bandits. I was by myself and I died. This game is too hard. And I say, well, did you hire any help before you left? And they never answer me, right? Because you should use this table and hire help. If you're going to start heading out and you know your character is new and not that powerful, hire some help. There's an adventurer. This guy can come with you. You know, he's not that powerful, but he has a dagger. Right? And you can buy a weapon and lend it to him. You can bring a thief with you. A magic user. I've actually used a magic user to great effect in some of my early games. Another thing is you can seek an audience. And basically that is, now see, the way the audience tables work, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, is when you seek an audience, when you get what we call news and information, all of those are scenarios. Okay, so these are not just tables like you would get on Drive-Thru RPG or something, where you roll on a table and it gives you some quaint little anecdote. Each of these things, like seeking an audience, obtaining news and information, are actually little scenarios. And these are the scenarios in the book. So a lot of times people will ask me, well, where are the scenarios that come with the book? Right? Is there a scenario book? Well, I'm working on a scenario book now because of this. But originally, the scenarios are in these tables. Right? So if you seek an audience, if you get an audience, the audience is going to be a mini scenario. So there are a lot of scenarios in this game and this book as it is written, but you have to go and try some of these things in order to get, you know, a scenario. So unlike a game like Gloomhaven or Legacy of Dragonholt, where you create your character and then you say, it says go to scenario 1. In an open-ended game like this, you kind of pick what you want to do and you kind of start doing that. And along the way, you will run into your scenario. The scenario will find you, is the best way I can put it. Now, I should explain that on the audience table, there are two tables. So you have what is called the seeking audience. And this table is basically rolling to see if the audience is going to be granted. So there aren't any scenarios in this table. You have to get through this table to actually get an audience. Once you get an audience, you would then go to that specific ruler and you would resolve your audience. And that is in the audience section of the book, right? And it might not be that clear, but this is the actual audiences. So when you roll on this table, if it says you are granted an audience with the Mayor of Milestone, then you would go to this section and you would roll for that audience with the mayor. And in these are the scenarios that I just spoke about. All of these are scenarios for the Mayor of Milestone, right? So if you want to play a type of game where right off the bat you really want to get a good scenario, then I would say you roll up your character and you stay in town, and your first daily action is you seek an audience with the mayor, and you start out in the town. So you'd seek an audience with the Mayor of Milestone. Now, you might have to roll 4 or 5 times before you get an audience. I mean, a mayor is not going to let some unknown person walk in his office. But once you get the audience, then you would go to this section and roll, right? And you would have your first scenario. You know exactly what your character is going to start to do, right? So let's just look real quick, take a peek at one of them. Since the mayor has heard of your journeys, he will donate 1,000 gold pieces to your cause if you assassinate his opponent running against him in the town election. And that's the scenario, right? So I'm not going to read any more of that. But basically, as a starting character, you can get 1,000 gold pieces if you're able to assassinate this opponent. Now, these are not easy scenarios, right? Which is why when I started my character, I didn't just go run and get a scenario, because I know they're not easy because I wrote them. But if that's what you want to do, if you want to start the game out with a scenario, then I would recommend you do that. These are rules as far as if it indicates that you're going to jail. These are rules for trials if you wind up in jail. And I love the trial mechanism. I've actually done a video on that where one of my characters got jailed and had to do a trial, and that's not fun. This is as far as getting sentenced if you are put on trial. Let's see what we got. The next section is, now this is another thing that people overlook, permission to study. So every town has its own form of magic. And this is different than spells or what wizards use. Basically, every town has like a little magic that they're known for, right? So certain towns are known for kind of illusionist tricks. Other towns are known for kind of magic that helps with animals. You can study the magic of any town without having any skill, without being a wizard. But you have to get permission. And that's what this table is for. So you would spend a daily action seeking permission to study that town's magic. Now, of course, you have to be in that town, right? But if you get permission to study it, right, when you finish your studies, you would then go to the part of the book that says Town Magic. Let's see where that's at. And this is what I was telling you about, kind of the last half of the book is mostly your scenarios and things. But here's the town magics, okay? So if you got permission to study, which is this table here, and it might take you a couple of days to get permission. You may even have to come back, you know, go get something or go acquire some skills, because there are some prerequisites. But then these are the magics abilities that you will have access to when you have completed your studies of that town's magic. So this section, magic spells and enchantments, this does not apply to wizards. I showed the wizards in the last video that the wards or the spells they have access to. And to kind of like distinguish it, magic is always going to be a lot weaker than the spells or wards. These are kind of parlor tricks, or what in D&D were called cantrips, right? wizards have access to very powerful spells and wards that alter reality. Most of this stuff is kind of just your parlor tricks, your enhanced abilities and things like that. I mean, some other towns like Elf Mountain, their magic is a little more powerful than some of the other towns. But every town kind of has its own form of magic. Like if you're worried about being able to heal and you're not a healer, then go study Morse Monastery's magic. Because their magic specializes in the healing arts. Right? So you can get access to some of this stuff that you can use. Whether you're a wizard, whether you're a healer, whether you're a cleric or not, you get these by studying that town's magic. The next section is called Special Items. This is mostly for merchants who have the ability to buy certain items in one town and then sell them in another town. And these are like unique items that can be bought in each town and then sold elsewhere. Practice or training. This is another good part of the rules that people, I think, don't use a lot. And that allows you to practice or train with a specific weapon. And you can increase your modifier whenever using that specific weapon. Not that type of weapon, the exact weapon. So say you have a sword and you name your sword Widowmaker. Well, if you practice and train with Widowmaker, whenever you use her, you will have like a bonus. Now, if you lose Widowmaker or it gets broken, then you will have a new sword and the bonus would not apply to that sword. You'd have to train with it. This is purchasing property, which we kind of discussed in one of the videos. Gifts or monuments. Again, that's kind of for your higher level characters. This is a section on men and women, and basically I put that in as a legacy component. So if you've been playing a character for a long time and you're worried about your character dying, you can actually, you know, read through this section. It can tell you about how to try to have kids. Another scenarios is news and information. So again, when you roll for news and information in a town, this is not just anecdotes of what's going on. Oh, you hear about a bar fight and that's it, right? Because you can do that in a regular role-playing game, right? In a regular role-playing game, if I'm the GM and you say, well, can you tell us what news and information is? I can say, well, a mysterious man came to town last week and checked into the tavern. Right now, that may be a hook, right? I'm trying to get you guys to investigate that. But in a solo role-playing game, these have to be independent scenarios. And so that's what they are, right? And so if you are interested in a scenario involving news and information, then you would roll for news and information. So again, you could roll up your first character. And the first thing you could decide to do is, well, I'm going to go right off the bat and look for some news and information. Meaning I'm going to go find something to get into. And I actually had one of these I did a whole scenario with in one of my playthroughs where I was following the prince and there was a group of bandits planning on ambushing him and his kitchen guard outside of the castle. And that actually was a pretty fun scenario. I didn't succeed at it, but it was a pretty fun scenario nonetheless. And in the new edition, I will tell you, in the revised edition, there's going to be a lot more news and information. Right now, you have this one news and information table with about, I think, 20 results on it. So no matter what town you're in, you would roll on this, you just roll in this section. In the new one, each town is going to have its own news and information section. So it will go from maybe being 20 to like, 80 or 40 different news and information scenarios will now be in the book. So the news and information you will get in like Milesteel will not be the same as the news and information that you will get in Wood Dam. So that's pretty cool. The next section is taverns. And again, taverns serve a purpose of giving you scenarios. If you spend your evening in a tavern, you're more than likely to have a scenario come out of that. So again, if we're looking at ways, where are the scenarios in the game? They're in Seeking an Audience, they're in News and Information, and they're in Taverns. So those are the three ways that you are going to get scenarios to play. Although you do not need to do that. It's an open-ended game. Most of the encounter cards have small scenarios on them. But your larger scenarios are all going to be done through or generated through your news and information, your taverns, and you're seeking an audience. And the taverns, not every town has a tavern, although in the revised version, I've actually given, I think the last few towns that didn't have a tavern now have taverns, like Zafton, which is kind of a port town. So they have a tavern now with some cool resorts in it. But in this version, Miles still has a tavern called the Foeman's Cave. Future Town has a tavern. Igloo has a tavern. And I know King's Castle has a tavern. And I thought there was one more in here. Was it Dwarf Haven? I thought Dwarf Town or Dwarf Haven had one. Dwarf Town has a tavern. So, and you have to be in that town, and obviously, to go to that tavern. But each tavern has its own kind of scenarios that will be generated if you spend the evening in that town in one of those taverns. This one here, I think King's Castle, they actually have a casino in their tavern, and these are people that are at the table with you at this casino game, which I thought is a pretty cool one. I haven't really done that yet. We talked about the magic spells and enchantments, again, where I showed you the table where you would request to study magic. So we're not going to go back over that. The audience with NPCs, again, I explained to you, if you seek an audience, then you would come to this section of the book and you would roll for the actual audience or the actual scenario. And again, you can see I wanted to put color in here to kind of bring the world to life, which I think this art and these pictures really do. They really kind of bring the world to life. You know, that's Elf Mountain. That is Wood Dam. This is, that looks like, oh, that's Future Town. That's Future Town. So, and all of these are colored. That's the town of Igloo. This is Morsh Monastery. And again, you can have an audience with the father of Morsh Monastery or / the mayor. And I'm not going to stay on these because I don't want to give you guys any spoilers. This is Dwarf Town. Right, I don't think that's Dwarf Haven. That's Dwarf Town. This is a section about replacing mayors, because there are certain scenarios where a mayor may join your party and travel with you, and obviously if the mayor gets killed, this just kind of explains, you know, after a certain amount of time there'll be a new mayor and it'll just basically be the same NPC. Alright, so that gets us to character combat. And I'm going to stop here for part 3. I think we're at about 28 minutes. But I think we actually made a lot of progress. Like, we're on page 121 already. So, and we're at character combat. And I do want to go into character combat a little more in detail, because there is a little confusion about how this works on the map. So I hope you guys are enjoying the series. Feel free to leave any questions down in the comments. Take care, and God bless.